So behind me, I have our new garden space that I'm going to be converting from lawn into big rows. So the space is about 30 feet by 50 feet, and it is now spring, it's early May, and I have been kind of working on this starting in the fall. So in the fall, I put down a big old silage tarp in this space, and just to kind of start to reduce that weed pressure and grass pressure. In the spring, I pulled that off and I rented a tiller for the day and I just tilled it over. I typically don't do a lot of tilling in my gardens, but for the kind of intro, getting it from lawn to garden, I felt really like I needed something a little extra. I didn't have time to do sheet mulching and all the materials. So as I did that first tilling, I also worked in some bone meal and some lime. My pH here is really low, 5.2, so I'm trying to bring up my pH a little bit. And today I'm going to be pulling back this landscape cloth that's been on here since the tilling happened like just 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm going to be pulling it all off. I'm going to be laying down some compost, creating some rows, putting in my drip irrigation, and putting back in place the landscape cloth with some holes burned in it. So I probably won't finish it all today, but I'm going to go ahead and get started and I'll show you how it goes. So Callie's found a snake that was living underneath the landscape fabric here, and she is pretty excited about it. So you might hear her barking in the background, but she basically is keeping like a 3-foot distance from it and just barking. So I don't think the snake or Callie is in any danger, and it's just a harmless little garter snake. So anyway, I have the fabric off, and you can see, I'll show you a close-up here, the ground is still got some weeds in it, so it'll be good today to put in the rows and then the compost on top and get it covered back up so I can keep suppressing those weeds, because I really don't want to be spending all of my summer weeding in this garden. I'm planning to do 4-foot rows with 2-foot walkways in between. And so I will be kind of keeping an extra foot on the outside edge as well, so that adds up to the exact space that I'm going to be needing here for my gardens, and I'll be able to get in 5 rows. So I want those really straight, so I'm going to try to measure and then lay it out nice and neatly, and then I'm going to dig some of the pathways out a little bit so that the beds are raised before I bring in the compost. Okay, so I've got my first row all dug out. I've got the 2 paths on either side, and I've brought in some compost. I'm just gonna scrape and top off that row so it's ready to go. I'm probably gonna try to get just about 2 inches of compost on the top so that I can just leave it on top and let it integrate down into the soil throughout the summer. So I'm back, and I have spent a lot of time this weekend working here in my rows, and I just wanted to take a minute and show you all the progress I've made. So you can see I started and I dug out each of the pathways just a little bit, about a half a foot, and added that soil to my raised bed. I then came back in and added a layer of compost about 2 to 3 inches along each of the beds, And then yesterday I came back into the garden and I laid out my irrigation system. So my irrigation system is from Johnny's, and it has, because my beds are 4 feet wide, I've actually put 2 of the dripper hoses in each of the beds. And then I'll show you here in a second, but I have right across the top, I have the main hose, and I tested it out today. It runs, it works, which means it is time for me to start burning some holes in my landscape fabric and laying that back down on top of the garden. I don't want to leave the soil bare too long because weeds will start growing the moment it is off and the sun can get to it. So this is the pressure and filter here. So you can, what I did here is I just put my normal garden hose right into it. There was some assembly required, but it wasn't anything super tricky. Then you run this kind of main hose out along one end of the garden. You can see it right here. And then the trickiest part was actually putting these nozzles here into the hose. You have to poke a little hole and then push them in, and I had to get something eventually because it was hurting my hand. I cut my inside of my hand trying to do it. So once you do that, you just attach the drip hose here and run that all the way down to the end of the garden. And then the last thing is you just put a stopper on the end so that you build up pressure and you get the dripping to occur all the way down. So I am hoping that this, for our climate here, is enough water. Again, the paths are 2 feet wide and the beds are 4 feet wide. So I felt like those 2 hoses down, I'd rather water a little bit longer and have it be kind of thicker, get a deeper water in those places. So we'll see how it goes. I have more dripper hose, so I could always go back and add it if I needed to. So I'm super happy with how it came out. And I'll show you as soon as I get all the holes burnt in the landscape fabric. My plan is to do it. I have some seedlings that really need to get here in the garden. So I'm gonna at least burn 2 of them tomorrow and try to get some of those seedlings planted. And then I'll be adding to the last few rows the covering as I can. You can see I've already got just a fabric down here. This bed here had the most weeds in it, so I just wanted to get something on top of it so it didn't have weeds grow. I don't know why, but when I tilled this garden, I measured 30 by 50 and I still didn't get quite as big as I should. So this one here has more grass in it than it should. So it'll be interesting to see how it does with the landscape fabric on top of it here. And here is the total finished product. Well, 90% finished. So I have all the holes burnt into the landscape cloth, and I have the irrigations all run, and I even have, if you look down here, some seedlings. These are snapdragons planted into the holes. And every time we get our wood shavings from the dump sometimes. So as we go to the dump, I'm just filling in the paths, just one, to keep down the weed cloth from growing, and then also just to give an easier place to walk. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and we will see how many weeds I get coming up through these little holes, but I'm pretty pleased.